So let's just put the back of the skirt to one side for the moment. We don't need to do anything with that one. And then what we're going to do is take both of our fronts, and let's have the top side up first. And then we're going to separate out our two threads from our top thread from our bobbin thread. And then holding on to the bobbin thread, top thread, sorry, we're going to then just pull on the fabric by holding our finger and thumb, and that will pull the fabric along those threads. So let's do it from the, I always gather from one side into the middle, and then the other side into the middle, and that goes quite nicely. And we'll make sure that we get that nice and even, and that gathers are sitting all nicely on top of each other. So you've got your little gathered edge like that, which is your start of your skirt gathers. And I want you to work with both of them in front of you so that you'll know where you are, because I think this next bit could be quite a little bit, is where a lot of people have got confused. So we're going to take the side bodice piece now, take our pin out of there, making sure we've got our snips marked in, our notches marked on there. Now just remember that this pattern piece here is symmetrical, so there's no right way or wrong way to have it. If you fold it in half along its length, then that's what's going to give you this side bodice. The snip that's at the centre, at the middle of where that fold line is the side that's going to go on to match up with your shoulder seam that you've already stitched. But just for now, you don't need to worry too much. We just need to make sure that we've got a left and a right. So I would have them in front of you like this, and then you've got your two skirt pieces, a left and a right here. I want that pattern to be on the front, so I've got the front facing towards me, and I've made sure that they're folding away from each other, because this is the side with the notch on, single notch, needs to be the side that are both pointing towards each other. So my single notch is there, my double notch, I've got one notch here and another notch here on the sides. So as we look at that now, that's our edge for our dress and for the way that it's going to sit on the garment, and this is going to be that seam that goes over the shoulder. So when we actually put these onto the garment, I want to have this one here is going to go over onto this side here, the one that I've already gathered, and I'm going to match up the raw edge of the bottom and put a pin in it, and have your pin heads pointing up over the top, and then I'm going to go to the other edge and match my other raw edge up and have the pin in and the head going up to the top. And then what I'm going to do now is adjust my gathers so that it's tight enough that it is quite tightly gathered, that all of those gathers mean that the edge of the skirt matches the length of the edge of the bodice. And when you're ready, let's put a pin in. Okay, just make sure that's all sitting all nice. So there's one. Let's turn it round again so that the skirt edge is down, and there's our bodice there going up and over the top of the shoulder. Can you see that, how that gets going over the top? So that's the way that we've done this first one. So now we need to make a mirror copy of it. So let's get our other skirt. Let's separate out our threads so that we've got those together. So you don't want a top and a bottom, you want your two tops or your two bottoms. Hold on to your threads and then just pull your fabric tightly in. And the same on the other side, so always gather in towards the middle. Saves you running out of thread the other side and pulling all your gathers out, so that's why we do it that way. So again, pull on your threads together evenly and get those gathers to meet in the middle. Once you've started, you know which ones you're gathering because they're the longer threads. Okay, so let's just put that gathered skirt down on the front of our work surface again. So here's our bodice. It's the same way as the other one was, and I'm going to take this bottom edge here and I'm going to fold it up so that it's right sides together with the skirt, and we're going to match it along this top edge here. I'm going to put a pin in so your pin head is pointing up, and then we're going to do the other one as well. So the pin heads are pointing up, and then I can turn it round to me so I can see the gathers, and I can see that the skirt edge is a little bit longer than the gathered edge, so when the bodice edge, so I need to just tighten that up just a little bit more, just to make that sit nicely. And then when you've got them both the same length, make sure you've got your raw edges together, make sure nothing's tucking down, and nothing's twisting, and then you want to put a pin in on the top here as well. So before we take this to the sewing machine, so then fold it back, turn it back around the other way so that you've got the skirt edge part down onto the work surface, and then when we fold these edges up, we can see again that we've got these shoulder seams pointing out towards opposite directions, and that's what makes sure we've got a left and a right. If you've got yours and both are going the same direction, you'll have two lefts or two rights, so that isn't correct. So just take time just to unpin and to change it round. But if you look at it, we've got our one of these bottom edges here onto the skirt, and they both go away from each other. Hopefully you can see that quite easily. So then let's just fold these back down onto our skirts while we take it to our sewing machine. Okay, so making sure that your tension is at the correct tension for your construction stitch. I've got mine about a 5, and you're onto a construction stitch length as well. Let's put I'm going to have the gather side upwards so that I can control that better and make sure that that's all sitting nicely. And just pull your gathers down just the length of your bodice, just to make the length of your skirt, just to make sure that's okay. And you can just neaten out your gathering threads, and because I've used a different colour, we can see those quite easily. Just make sure they're out of the way. And then with a 1 centimetre seam allowance, we're going to stitch this skirt on. So a couple of stitches forward and a couple of stitches back, and then needle in the work. And then we're going to take out our first pin now we've started, and taking your time to make sure this is nice and flat underneath, just so that skirt with the 1 centimetre seam allowance, and reverse at the end. Make sure when you cut your starting and finishing threads that you don't cut off your gathering threads, because you need those in a moment. And you're going to repeat that same process for your other side as well. Right, what I want you to do first before you take out your gathering threads is turn your work over and have a little look, and just make sure that you're happy with the gathers and you're happy with that seam, and that you've got no puckers in that side bodice. That one's okay, because it's much easier to put it right now before you've taken out your gathering stitches. So if you had got a pucker, just go back, take out the few stitches, and then just smooth it out, and then just stitch over it again, and then you should be fine. But once you've actually got that done, then you can choose one of your threads that was for your gathering and pull it out. You should have 4 per side, so that one will pull out straight away, and then the other ones. And if you've missed your stitching, it's easier to pull on the ones that you've already started gathering, so look for the longer threads, and they should pull out, and then that should leave that all nice and neat for you on the inside. So just got a couple of threads, but we're all nice and neat. Okay, so let's take out these gathering threads this side as well. And that's why I say you can pull with confidence when you know that you've got your different colour thread, which makes it easier. Mine's not wanting to come out. Sometimes it doesn't. Just use your quick unpick if you need to, if it doesn't want to come out properly. Okay, it has done. Okay. So let's just put these back down on the work surface how they are, because the next thing that we probably need to do is just to neaten these edges. And I'm just going to zigzag across these edges now just to neaten those. So let's put onto a zigzag stitch. And I've got a stitch width of 5 and a length of 2. I might take that down to 1.5. So I've got a stitch width of 5 and then a length of 1.5. So that's that one just neatened off. And if you've got an overlocker, yes, by all means go ahead and overlock this, but I'm doing zigzag because I'm guessing that most of you will have a zigzag stitch on your sewing machine. Okay, I've got a thread left in there from my gathering. Okay, So let's pop this on here now. Because the next thing that we're going to do now is we're going to put our ties on. Now you can put them onto the front, but I think it's just as easy to put them onto the back here. So let's have the front so that they're splaying away from each other, and then we're going to take one of the front ties here, and it's going to go on this front edge here. It's going to point towards your side seam, and then choose which side you want up. I want that side up, and then let's just put it over that centre seam there where that gathering edge is, and I'm just going to put a few stitches in, not on a zigzag, take it off a zigzag stitch, and just put a few stitches in just to hold that in place. So there's one. So let's keep putting them back down, always just to find our orientation again. And here's the other one. And if you notice, I'm not putting the neatened side against that edge. Use the side that's got the raw edges that could fray right on top of that edge just there. And I've turned that one round so that I've got the same sort of part of the tartan on each side. So that should go right and look nice. Make sure that when you're doing this, your seam, your gathers for your skirt seam is up towards the bodice. Just a few stitches will just hold that in place while we're working with them. I think it's sometimes easier to do it at this stage than it is to do it at the other stage, because we can see that ties are going to go around to the back and tie at the back, which is what we want. Okay, so the next stage then is we're going to now join the panel on the front here onto the back. Are we doing that, or are we going to do this back skirt? Let's go on to our gathering of our back skirt here. I've got the right side up. Let's just take the two threads from the both same side. So either the two top threads or your two bobbin threads. And then holding tightly onto those, we can then gather the fabric up towards the centre. And before we lose it, let's just put a pin that we can see in the centre front there, so that we don't lose that, because it tends to hide in all the gathers once we've got the gathers all going up. So we're just sort of starting it off at this point. Let's go to the other side now and get our other threads. And gather that into the centre as well. And if your thread keeps breaking when you're trying to do gathers like this, it could be that your thread's old, because if your thread's in the light, then it will deteriorate over time. So just be aware of that. It's not a problem with the technique, it's a problem with the actual thread you're using. So it might be tempting to do what I was just thinking, and I've gathered up the skirt ready, but we can't attach the back of the skirt onto the back of the bodice yet because it's only this wide. And what we actually need to do is attach the side panels onto the back here, because that's going to extend the width of the back skirt. Can you see how that's going to happen? So let's attach our side panels on first onto the front facing, and it's all in one, so that's why it's going to feel a bit strange. So what I've done is I've got my front with my ties, look, going out to the sides. Again, let's just get our orientation and just refresh our memories where we are. And I've got that right sides up. I've then got the right side up of the front facing and the back panel, okay? And what I'm going to do first is take this one here, and I'm going to fold it over. Just make sure that these are going out to the, the side panels are going curving out and away. We're then going to take one of these side panels, and then we're going to fold it over on top of our front panels, and we're going to put a pin in. Put your pin so the heads are pointing out. And let's just get our orientation. So I've pinned the bottom of that long side panel to the bottom of the back panel. I'm then going to find my notch on the top of my shoulder, which is there, and that's going to line up directly on top of my side shoulder seam. So let's put another pin in just there. Hold that still. And then I'm going to come down to the bottom down here. Is there another notch? can't remember if there's another notch down here or not. No, it was where the side, oh there is, isn't there, because that's where the waist seam is. Yes there is, it's just there. So there's another notch on the waist, and that's where we're going to put the top of our tie, because that's what that notch was for. I knew there was one. And pin on top of that, but it's going to be quite thick just there, so just be aware of that. And then we're going to go down to the bottom towards the hem. Now just be mindful that at the bottom of the hem you should have an overlap. And let me just see how long that is for you. Oh, there's my seam gauge, that's a better thing to use. And that's about 1 inch. So your front skirt panel is about 1 inch shorter than your skirt, and that is correct. So when we lay this all down together, all nicely, when we start to pin it together, you need to have 1 inch free at the bottom of your skirt. 1 inch longer on the skirt than it is on the front of the panel. So yeah, that's fine, that takes that up to there. And put a pin at the bottom of the hem just to hold that straight, and that will make sure then that you've not stretched this front panel when you've been stitching it. Your tartan won't line up at this point, so don't worry about that. And then let's go back to this neck edge here, and let's just do our pins along here just to make sure that's all going to sit all nicely for us. And we've got one attached on. I would suggest you do these one at a time and sew them. So if I just fold that back, you'll see, hopefully, that there's our crisscross, our bias trimmed front panel along there with the lines going diagonally. That's the back of our garment, and that's the side panel on it, and then we go into the gathered skirt. I hope that all makes sense. So, just put that one to one side for a minute. Back to our machine. We're going to sew this with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm just going to put one more pin on the back here just to hold that right. And I suspect that the bottom of there will just be about right. Okay. So this time I'm going to start from the bottom of the skirt and sew up just because of the way that it's all sitting. So I'm not going to go past down onto the inch of the skirt. I'm just going to feel with my finger where the hem, where the bottom of the front panel is, and I'm going to sew there with my 1/4 inch seam allowance. Couple of stitches forward, couple of stitches back, and then needle in the work and take out the first pin. Just make sure your raw edges are together. And stop for your pins. Make sure everything's lying all nice and flat. Just take your time through where your centre waist is, because that your tie's behind there as well. Just make sure everything's lying nice and flat. Take time over your shoulders as well, because they're a little bit bulky. And then reverse at the end. Take out our threads. So now if we go back to where we were, let's lay that front panel so that's flat, and now if we fold the other side back, we can see we've got that tied, that sewn on now with our panel. So I'm going to take the pin out that side now, showing me which is the front, because we now know which side we're working on. So that's all going nicely. So let's now do the other side. So first of all, let's put our front skirt down onto our work surface, onto our cutting mat, and we've got the skirt down, and then we've got the side panel is veering off towards the side, towards the right. Okay, so then let's take this one and let's fold it over so that right sides are together, and then we're going to start to match this up again. So let's find that notch on the top of the shoulder first, which is there, and let's match that up with our shoulder seam first and put a pin in. and the pin heads are facing out. And then let's lay this down along the back of the bodice and put a pin in the back there, matching your raw edges together. We keep that seam allowance nice and neat. I think this is one of those dresses that's going to be much easier when you see somebody make it, as opposed to have to try and understand what are meant by the written instructions. So let's just take, so hopefully this video is helpful. And just if I can just say, if you are finding value in this video, if you wouldn't mind either becoming a subscriber or considering becoming a subscriber, then I'd love to know that you're here and watching. But also, if you could give the video a thumbs up, and if you could leave me a comment, just something simple, it really does help push my channel out to more viewers. And I want to try and get as many people as I can to sew and to feel confident. So I'm hoping to reach all those people who might have looked at the winter dress and who think that they couldn't possibly make it, and to give them the confidence that with help together that we can do. And your thumbs up on my video and a comment will help me to help the YouTube know that it's a good video. Anyway, back to this. But thank you if you do take the time to do that. I really appreciate it. So let's match the tie up now with that notch on the side of the dress there, that we know that, like we did the other one, the other side, and put a pin in quite thick just there. And then we're just going to smoosh down our fibres in order to pop the edges together just there. And now we're going to work down the skirt, and we're going to remember that we need to have about an inch on the bottom of the skirt. So I need to be just above that white line there to be the same as the other side. So I can do that and put a pin in, and then just make sure that this front edge now matches the front edge of the dress panel. Front and front facing, if I'm using the correct terminology. Sometimes I forget to do that. Okay. So once you've got your second one pinned on the same way, just do a quick sanity check with it. Let's just pop it down so that it's onto our work surface. And then if we just peel it back, let's just make sure that when we peel it back, we've got our two diagonal looking panels are facing each other. So the front and the two front panels, and that we're on this long edge here, and that the ties then are pointing out towards the sides. Okay, so I'm just going to take this to the sewing machine. I'm going to sew all the way down here like I did before. I'm going to reverse at the stop and the start, and just remember that you're going to stop about an inch off from the edge, because that's for your hem, for turning up your hem on the bottom of the dress. Okay, and so now we've done that, we can fold that one out now as well. Oh, take that pin out of the side there where that's on onto that dress. So we don't need to mark the front anymore because we know where those are. And just make sure that this is what yours looks like. So we've got those diagonal panels on the front going down and towards the back, the side panels with a scoop that's going to be for the arm, and then we've got the skirt, and the skirt is extending by an inch on both sides here, which is where our hem is going to be. So we're just going to do some zigzagging at this stage as well. So let's just get on and do some neatening before we forget, or before I forget. So I'm just going to turn this back, and I'm just going to take this back to the machine and zigzag along this long edge just here. And I'm going to stop at the edge of the side panel because we'll do the hem separately. And then I'm going to do the same on the other side just here and just get that neatened. Just take care where you're going over where the waistline is, because that is quite thick and bulky where that tie is. So I'm just going to slow down my speed at that section, and I'm just helping the fabric through slightly. I just go back then and look for where there's any whiskers like this, where they're just sticking up, and I just take those off as well, just to neaten that edge. Sometimes you have some, sometimes you don't have many. Just try not to cut through the zigzag stitches that you have just made, because obviously we want those to stay in place so that they can neaten everything off. And then if you want to do that to the other side, or the other panel with the facing, and then we'll be able to move on to the next step. Finish zigzagging, and all I'm going to do now is, before we move on any further, is I'm just going to press all of this, the neatened side seam towards the skirt. So I just want to take a moment just to press that and keep that looking all nice. just help everything all sit out properly and just keep where it should be. And pressing as you go will help you. It just helps everything sort of stay straight and just stay nicely put together, really, I suppose. Just watch you don't burn yourself on your steam like I did earlier. Fingers still a little bit sore. I think steam is sometimes worse than heat, isn't it? Okay, and then we can just press from the inside if you want to, just to make sure that everything's all sitting all nicely. Especially where that tie is, that tie doesn't seem to want to stay down very nicely. But we can always put a few little hand stitches in just to reinforce it at that point, just to keep it, encourage it to sit straight. I'm just on the inch overhang of the hem down the front facing, I'm just turning that in so that it's pressed in, it's just in nice and neatly in there. And this fabric will really hold on to any threads you've got, so just be aware of that because they do get everywhere. Right, let me unplug my iron and then we will talk. Oh no, we need the iron actually. Let's talk about the sleeves. Right, so let's just put this to one side for the moment before we put the actual back skirt on. We'll just neaten these sleeve edges because we've got this machine on zigzag anyway. So that's the back of the neck, and these are our two side seams, and this bit here is what's going to form the sleeves. I know it doesn't look like it, but it will, believe me. Can you remember those 2/4 of an inch snips that we put into the side of the sleeves? We've got those at the side. While you've got your iron out, what I want you to do is fold it back. So put your bodice down so it's right side down, and then I want you to just take your seam gauge or your measuring gauge and just measure 1/2 centimetre or 1/4 of an inch in, and then I just tend to put pins in to hold mine, and I pin into my ironing board because that holds it nice and neat and steady without burning my fingers, which obviously I've done already, so I don't want to do it again. And then once you've done that, just press on that edge just to give it a bit of a memory. Because if we press it after we've zigzagged it, we might take in more than we should do. And we want to make sure that we keep to that original 1/4 of an inch that we need to do. Just blow on it just to dry it. And then you'll see that you've actually got some memory, a creased memory in that edge just there. And that's what we want. So let's turn it round and do the other side as well. And if you've done your 1/4 of an inch snip on the side, then the side seams here, can you see that little jog there in the fabric? That needs to stay like that. I'm going to take this to the sewing machine now. I'm going to fold it out as if it hadn't been folded over, but then only on that edge that we've the raw edge that we folded in, I'm now just going to zigzag along there. It's just to neaten that edge. So keep an eye on where that edge is, and just be careful because it might try and pull your fabric down into the machine. So let's just see how we get on. Okay, we're okay. And if you're going to stop, then you want to stop so that your needle is in the actual fabric, so it's on a zig, not on a zag. And then we're going to carry on round. And then stop when we get to the other edge. We're going to take off our starting and stopping threads, and we're going to trim off any whiskers that we've got that are sticking up, and I've just got a few there. Very, very fraying, this material, is it just going to fall to pieces. It looks nice when it's done, but it's just that kind of. So there we've got a zigzagged edge on the edge there. So now let's just go back and let's just do the other one. Let's fold it out. And the reason I'm doing it now, it might be out of order with Sarah, I've forgotten to look at the instructions and see if I'm in the same order as Sarah's doing it, is because I think that it's easier to manage all of this while you've not got the skirt attached to, because as soon as we've got the skirt on, we're going to be wanting to do the side seams. So if we do this a little bit now, then we know we're not going to forget and it's not going to be a problem. So then what you need to do is remembering where we had that ironed in memory, we're going to fold it back again so that it is ironed in. And I'm going to take it off my zigzag stitch. And we're going to stitch that edge down just neatly. I am going to reverse at the start and the stop. And you're just going to sort of go through the edge of that zigzagged edge to make sure that it stays flat against the edge of the dress, edge of the bodice. And I have reversed at the edge, at the end, at the start and stop. So again, we're just working with that 1/4 of an inch area where we made those snips. So if I show you again now. So we've got a little jog at the bottom of the back of the bodice there. Then we go on to where that snip was, which we've now neatened and folded under and top stitched. And then before we get to the edge of the bodice here, we've got another little jog in the fabric there. And that's what's going to allow us then to put the side seams together and to sew that together for going down. But we're going to put our skirt on first. So that's what we've done on both sides. So I just need to top stitch this other side. So if you go ahead and get yourself to that same stage, and then we'll attach our skirt to the back. Okay, so let's have a little look and see where we are. So we've now got our front skirts on to our front panels here, the diagonal bits. We've got the back on and we've got the side backs on that come through to the side front as well. I think that's quite a confusing pattern piece for people if you're not used to dressmaking, because when it's finished that back folds under and that forms the back, and then you've got your neckline here. But what we're going to do now for now is if we just sort of pull it all towards it so that we've got this back edge at the top here. And we've got our skirt that we started to gather before we stopped ourselves, and we want to turn the skirt round so we've got the right side down onto the right side of our bodice. And what we're going to do first is where we've got that pin for the centre notch, we're going to match up that centre back notch first and put a pin in. And then we're going to go to the side of our skirt here, and that's going to match up to the side of our back bodice now that we've got those side pieces on, and that can have a pin in it. And then let's go across to the other side, and then let's just put another pin in that side to hold the side bodice to the skirt on the back there. So when we fold this out, your skirt should match the length of your bodice at the back here. Now we've got to gather ours in a bit more, but at least we know we've got our starting points and our middle point together. So let's find our long threads, because they're the ones that we'll have been using for gathering. So that's my longest one. So let's pull on those and tighten up these gathers now until the back of the bodice to that first pin is the same length as the side that we're working on, so that the bodice is flat and the skirt is all gathered, and that's the same length. So then we can start and put some more pins in. Have the heads pointing up. The reason why on gathers I like the heads pointing up is because if you've got your heads of your pins down into your gathers, sometimes the gather will cover it up and you can't see it. Whereas if you've got them up over the top here like this, you can always see them. Just trying to help so you don't leave pins inside your garments, because it has been done before. I know it's one of those things. Okay, let's go to the other side now. Let's find our long gathering threads again, so the longest one out of the 4, and then we can then pull on those threads again and just tighten up these gathers in the back of the skirt. Just try and make sure you don't get a flat patch where your pin is, because that's quite easy to do, unfortunately, and you'll always then sort of know, oh, my pin's dropped out, let's put it back in again. Okay, so I think that's about right. Seam allowance for the side panel is going towards the side seam, so that's fine. That's where we want it. And then just putting in as many pins as you're comfortable with, just to hold that together. Okay, so if we look from this side, from the back, we can see there's no puckers in that back at all. It's all nice and flat. And if we look from the side of the skirt, we've got all of our tucks and they're all going down towards our skirt, all of our gathers. So let's go to our sewing machine. We're on a straight stitch again. Just make sure you're on your straight stitch before you start. Let's try and keep these gathering threads out of the way. That's why they're easy to see when they're a different colour. And then we're going to sew this with a 1 centimetre seam allowance, and I sew with my back panel down and my gathered panel up, because then I can see what I'm doing. And we want a 1 centimetre seam allowance, so a few stitches forward and a few stitches back. That's a bit speedy, wasn't it? Sorry. And then needle in the work before we take out our first pin, and then we can get ourselves all nice and straight. Oops, pulled that pin by accident. Right, and then we're going to carry on doing our 1 centimetre seam allowance and on the back here. Remember, you're working with those tartan stripes, so it is easy to go wobbly if you're not careful. Or for it to look wobbly on the other side, should I say, really. And then I'm going to reverse at the end when we get to the end of the pin hiding. Needle out of the work and cut off our starting and our stopping threads. Okay, so again, before we take out our gathering threads, let's have a little look. We want to make sure that seam there is nice and flat with no gathers in it and no puckers, and then here we want to make sure that we've gathered that okay and that that's all looking nice. Once we're, let's just fold it out this way first as well and have a little look and make sure that we're happy with all of that, and I think I am. Okay, so now let's find our longer threads. And we're going to pull on one, and it should pull all the way through to the other side. And then we can pull the corresponding bobbin thread for that one, which should come out fairly nice and easily, unless it's got caught in our stitches. One has at the end, but we'll sort that out in a second. And then let's take out the longer thread again of the top ones here, so that remove all of those gathering threads. Just got one that's got caught just here towards the end. So if it gets caught, just take out as much as you can. Try not to yank on it too much, because you can snap your stitches that you've used for your actual seam. And then just keep taking it out until you've removed it all. All of a sudden it should just sort of give up the ghost, and it should let go, and you should be out. That's all done. Let's throw those away. Okay. So there's our waist looking all nice with all of those gathers all looking lovely. And our dress is really, really coming together now. I mean, I wouldn't say it's nearly finished, because we've probably got a little bit more to do, but we're certainly getting there. But what we're going to do now is, before we do anything else, is we're going to zigzag across this back and just neaten that edge. So let's go back to our machine, onto a zigzag stitch, and I've got a 5 width and I've got a 5 width and a 1.5 length. I haven't reversed because we're going to be sewing the side seam as well, and that'll catch those edges in. So let's take off our starting and stopping threads, and then let's just identify if we've got any whiskers, which we have, because this fabric loves to fray. And we're just going to take out anything that looks like it shouldn't be there. Just give us a nice edge, because this edge is going to be seen, so we want it to be looking as nice and neat as we can get it. Not looking too bad now. Just try not to cut through any of your zigzag stitches, because they're there to do a job. The next thing that I would suggest we do is just press up this hem, because once it's in the round it's a little bit more difficult to work with. So let's just do our hem first, and we know that we're going to be turning up 1 inch, so let's go and turn up 1 inch on the back of this skirt. And I think mine's just above that white line. And just to make sure you've got everything straight, just make sure that your tartan lines are on top of each other, because so going up, so that when I press this, I'm not pressing it like that so that it's on a skew width. I'm making sure that that line is on top of there. Just pop your pins in, it'll just help you keep everything all lovely and neat. Press up the front as well, and then we can zigzag that side, that edge as well, can't we? So then I'm just going to use the iron to just press that seam down. Just give it that memory. The reason why I don't zigzag first and then press it up is because sometimes, depending on how neat your zigzagging is or how accurate it is, sometimes it can take more than the seam allowance or more than you've allocated for your hem, and then in that case it then distorts the hem and makes it uneven. So if you get into the habit of putting this little creased memory in it first whilst it's in the flat, it's much easier to work with. Okay, that's the back done. If I just show you, look, so that's all up there, but then if I just open that out, you can see we've got that crease along there. So that once that cools, that'll be even easier to use. Let's go on to a front now. So I'm just above that white line, making sure that's all nice and neat. You remember that I just turned in that corner, that edge, so I'm just going to leave that edge going up as well, so that's all nice and neat. Just it was just on that facing edge, wasn't it, that it just was down. So now what we're going to do now is we are going to take our dresses and we're going to sew the side seam. So where we sewed and neatened the edge for the armhole, let's go to there first. And what we should find is that your waist seam should be on top of each other and should match. And then if your notches are accurate and your seam allowances are accurate, then you should be right on top of each other for that seam allowance. So let's put a pin on the underarm point. Let's put a pin in matching those waist seams because they should match. And if you've got one that doesn't, you can always go and just take a little more if you want, but I wouldn't. Let's just get everything else matching first. Let's go down to the bottom of the hem. So fold out where you've just pressed and let's just put that together so that that's all nice, the same length. And then going round, you want to make sure that your tartan lines are on top of each other if you want to be, if you're bothered about pattern matching. If you're not bothered about pattern matching, don't worry so much. I'm just popping those on together so that they all match. Okay, so there we've got one side seam done. Now let's come on to the other side. So make sure you just get your ties out of the way. You don't want to be sewing your ties in at the same time. So let's open out this hem edge and get our tartan matching. That's important, I think, for the overall finished look of the garment. And that should be fairly straightforward if you put your pattern pieces together when you were cutting them out. Then let's go to the underarm and match that. And let's go onto the waistline and match that seam up as well. Okay. So now I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and I'm going to just sew a straight stitch down at that, starting at that very point where we've neatened the edge and then we've got the little jog in the fabric just there. I'm going to start there and come down here and then come down to the hem. Fold your hem out and go all the way to the bottom of the hem and reverse at the start and the stop, because then that will just fold under when we get to doing that bit and it'll be all nice and neat and ready. So let's just take this to the sewing machine. Let's take it off a zigzag stitch for now. It's quite easy to change, isn't it? Then 1/4 inch. Make sure your machine's lined up. Couple of stitches forward, couple of stitches back, and then needle in the work. Take the first pin out, and making sure that all your waist edges are up to the top. We've matched. Yes, we did neaten that back. I was just checking. And then we're going to sew down, but just take your time as you're going to the point where your waist is, because you've got quite a lot of gathers there that need to sort of all be included in the seam, and you want your seam allowances to go up towards your shoulders on your skirt. Just make sure your raw edges are all together and that everything's all staying nice and neat. Just as you're getting down to the end, just make sure that you've got your hem folded out. just reverse at the end. Take our threads off. And if we just have a look from the other side, you can see that that's fairly, it's not as neat as I would like it perhaps, but it, you know, but you're not going to get it perfect because of the way that the seam is. You've got to do it beforehand, and all you can do is trim off any little loose bits or put a little bit of extra zigzag under there if you need to, or you can go in with a little bit of fray check liquid and just do that just so that it'll hold it steady for you to neaten that off. And then what we're going to do now is do the other side as well. So just sew down the other side exactly the same way, and then I'll come back to you and we'll neaten our hem, and then we'll stitch our hem up. So before we do our seams, our hem zigzagging, we need to just go down and neaten the edges of our side seams. So let's go back to the machine. Let's put it onto our zigzag again. 5 width and a, oh no, change that then, hold on a second. 5 width and the 1.5 length, and then we're going to now just go through and just zigzag across here. I am going to reverse at this top and bottom just under the arms because I think that that's sort of like a bit of a point where it could fray. All the way down to the bottom. Let's take off our starting threads. And anything that's just wanting to be a bit fuzzy and a bit fray-like as well, just neaten that all off, just to try and improve that finish as much as you can do. It's a little bit difficult to do because of the nature of having all those raw edges. As I say, this fabric wants to just fray so easily. It's lovely fabric, but it just does want to fray. So we have to control it. Just taking off those whiskers or any threads that are out of place. And then we can go back and do the other. But if you look at our pattern on our skirt, look, it's all matching across the seam there on the skirt. There's a seam down there, and it's just, whoops, disaster in the kitchen. And that's all just nice and neat down there. So let's do the other side first, and then all I'm going to do is take it to the sewing machine and I'm just going to neaten across the edge here. Oh, I do apologise for the noise. I'm just going to neaten across the edge here for the skirt as well. So just keep it folded out and just neaten, zigzag all the way along there. Okay, so my husband Rob sent his apologies for the racket that was in the kitchen. He was trying to be helpful, so he's been sent back to watch the sport so that he doesn't interrupt us anymore. But he does send his apologies. Okay, so I've zigzagged. I keep picking bits off this fabric. I think I'll be doing that for the next few hours. What we'll need to do now then, if you can see, I have zigzagged around the hemline and I have trimmed off as many of the whiskers that I could see, is then go back to your creased edge, and then we can just literally just put a pin in to hold this. You can hand stitch this down, and I probably, will I hand stitch it down? No, my stitching is going to fall into this, so let's just do a different way of pinning this. Let's pin at right angles to the hem, because that will then mean we can get closer before we have to take our pins out. Just take off the threads that you can see. And I'm just pinning this in place up. I have kept my threads on for the where I did my zigzagging, because I can use that in order just to neaten up these edges on the side. I'll explain what I mean in a minute. I know I can talk in double Dutch sometimes. Okay, so we want the edge of the facing to be really nice and neat with the edge of the hem. So I've saved those because I'm going to use those threads there for going just down here by hand, because I think that will be neatest. So I want that to be right on top there. So I've pinned, words right, Claire. Where you've got your inch overhang, we folded the edge in when we pressed it, when we were pressing that facing. And so now we've got a nice folded edge on there. So I've put a pin in to hold that in place, because I want that to be held in place very nice and neatly. I'm then putting pins at right angles to the hem in order that we can go round and we can machine sew this hem. If you would like to, and if you've got the time and you want to hand stitch it, I think that would look even nicer. But I'm going to just try and get this video done for you and uploaded because I know there are people waiting for it. There's that one. So let's go up to the edge here, and the same on the edge here. Just make sure that everything's all nice and neat on the edge there. I'm going to finish, you want it to finish nice and level. Okay, so then I'm going to take this back to the sewing machine. I'm going to take it off the zigzag stitch first, and then I'm going to take my stitch length down up to a 3 for top stitching. I'm not going to reverse stitch on my hem, and I'm going to stitch quite close to the top. So let's take that first pin out before we start, and I'm going to just go straight ahead. So I haven't reversed on the hem at all, and I'll show you that invisible finishing that I like on the top of the hem at the end. So let's put a needle in our work as we want to readjust things. And I'm trying to make sure that all my tartan is all on top of each other, the stripes. Put in as many pins as you needed to make sure you were comfy. Let me have a little look, see if I'm happy with that. Yeah, you're not going to really notice that. When I get to the end here, I'm going to run onto the edge of the facing, but I'm not going to reverse. And I'm going to leave myself with a nice long thread so that I can finish that off by hand. Okay, our hem is sewn. How lovely does that look? It's looking all nice. So all that needs to happen now is there needs to be a little bit of finishing. So let me get a hand sewing needle and my glasses, because I shall be needing those. So let's work with the hem first. So let's go onto the front and see where the front of the hem finishes and find our corresponding thread for that one. And you can normally see where there's a little loop, and if you pull the loop you'll end up with both threads on the same. Can you see how I've not got any thread on there now? It was out that side, wasn't it? So let's just separate those out from the zigzag. So those are from my hem. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a knot in those threads. So this is just for the hem thread. Just do 2, don't put it too tight because you don't want it to pucker up your stitches. And then when I've got it nice and neat, let's take off the end. And then let's put the threads through our needle. And now I can just do a little stitch down towards the bottom of the hem, making sure, oh, I've gone through both. Making sure you don't go through both sides. So I'm not through that side, so I've taken it in just here where I knotted my threads off, down to the bottom, and then I'm just going to pull those threads through, including the knot, just give it a little tug, and then I'm going to take those threads off. Discard those. Then on the zigzag stitch you should have both towards one side already. I've got one here, I don't know why that one's there. So I've got one here, but you only need one. So let's thread the needle with that first. And now see where you've got a little hole here at the bottom of the facing. I'm just going to do a couple of stitches in place on the edge here. This is with the edge of the zigzag stitch, and then just hand stitch that shut with a little slip stitch. It's just a finishing touch. It's just going to neaten it off. We might as well use that zigzag thread while we've got it there, haven't we, rather than have reversed. It's a little bit thick down towards the end there, but should be able to do it. Give it a wiggle. And then you can't see any of those stitches on the inside, and can you see how your hem just stops, just dead? And it's just nice and neat. You've not got any of that bulkiness of, oh, you have got a little bit there, that's a spare thread. But you've not got any of that bulkiness where you would have had if it were reverse stitching. And then I'm going to do the same again. I'm going to just go in through a stitch and just take the thread up through the needle on the inside, between both parts of there, and that'll just give us a nice long tail just to not come undone. That's the other zigzag thread that's got caught in the threads anyway, so that keeps that nice and neat. And if you find anything else, you're going to find, honestly, seriously, you're going to find bits all over this fabric for weeks to come, I think. At least it's not on the outside, is it? It'll look nice and tidy then, hopefully. So just take any threads off that you can see. So we've got a nice edge there to the end of our dress and facing. Let's go to the other side now and do exactly the same. So let's work with our hem edge first, and if you're not quite onto the hem edge, all you have to do is thread your needle. So all I do now is, depending on how far away I am, I can take either 2 stitches or 1 stitch, is I just by hand put those stitches in, just to make sure that that looks as if it finishes exactly the same way on the others. On the other side, let's keep our zigzag threads out the way, isolate the 2 hem threads, knot those together. And again, this is all in the detail. Yes, you can just cut your threads off. Yes, you can reverse you can reverse your stitching and what have you. But if you're wanting to elevate your sewing and get a really nice finish, just taking a few minutes just to do these extra steps will just make all the difference. I think so anyway. Right, so that's with the hem one. So now let's just thread the needle through in the 2 sides, so you can't see either. Give it a nice long edge, just give it a pull so that that knot goes into the fabric. Tension on your fabric and your ends disappear inside. And then let's go back to our zigzag threads. We've got 2 this side, so I can use both of them together. Universal lick the end of your thread just to get it to go through. And now we're just going to do a few stitches just to hold down the edge of this facing, so that looks all nice and neat. And then we should be looking something right. And can you see how we're straight on that edge there, look? So we've not got a big step on the bottom here, we've made it as neat as we can on there. Okay, let's have a little look at our dress and see how we're doing, because I think we're about onto the buttons and the fastenings for it. Just needing to go around and just trim off or remove any bits of thread that we don't want. Remember to leave your threads in that you do want for your buttons and your buttonholes. Okay, the other thing that I want to do is I've just got some threads showing from the stitches showing from where I did the stay stitching for the facing. So I'm just going to take those out, and because we did those in a size 4, then they're easy to see and take out. So you're just giving a bit of a quality control check over to your garment. Just make sure that you're happy with everything. And make sure you don't pull out any threads that you don't want to. Very easy on a loose weave fabric to unpick the wrong bit. Right, okay, I'm as happy as I can be for the moment. I think that we've got most of those threads off for now that we didn't want. So let's turn the garment round so we've got the neckline towards us and as if we were wearing it, because we now want to get the right orientation, and for a girl generally it's right over left. So let's just mark the right side so that we know that that's the one that we want to go on top. Okay. So then when we put it back down again, we can see where we are. So that's my right side on top, and then my left side's going to go underneath. So let's get my little haberdashery pack. Where have I put that? So oops, pattern pieces everywhere, which is why I need to put those away. So first of all, I'm going to suggest that we sew on the buttons. I know it might feel counterintuitive, but I think that the buttons are easier to sew on because you have to go in and out with those, whereas on the, sorry for the crinkling, 2, 4, 6 buttons and 4 press studs. Right. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to make sure we've got all of our tailor's tacks kind of in place and we know where they are. There's one there, that's loose, and then there's one on the edge there. So they're going to follow all the way down. So let's get our black thread. What should we? No, I'm going to use black thread on the black buttons. I think that'll look nicest. So let's thread up our needle. And you're going to want to really make sure that your buttons are sewn on nice and securely, especially if this is for a child, because the buttons are tiny and they present a choke risk. So we want to make sure that we've got those really securely on if it's going to be a gift. And what we need to do is, we know we're going to put the buttons on in the 6 places on the top. So let's start off with these bottom ones because they're nice and clearly marked. And we want to make sure that we can put them all in the same place going up. And there's also a right side and a wrong side to your button. So the button is slightly recessed on, it's got a scoop on the top on one side and it's flat. So we're going to use the recessed side up. So I take my knot and I leave my knot underneath my button. So I'm going to use this place here as being my first position. So I take a bite of my thread of my fabric with my thread and my needle. One of those I've got a loop on it. Let me just neaten that up. And then now that I've got that anchored, I'm now going to go in through the underneath and back down again on my button. And then I'm going to go straight back down. Now I'm going to have my buttonholes going across as well. So that's another little detail. I like to try and keep my buttons with the holes. There's only 2 holes in these, going straight across as well, just so that they're all the same. Again, it's just a little detail. You don't have to do that if it doesn't bother you, but it's just something that I think, again, doesn't elevates it and doesn't draw your eye away. So now we've got that button on, let's take out that tailor's tack with the edge of the needle while we're here, because we can. This should all just pull out for you. Keep those out of the way of your fabric, otherwise they will end up everywhere. So I'm doing about 5 or 6 stitches through the button to really hold that on nicely. And then when I finish, I'm going to go onto the back. I'm going to do a few stitches in place on the back, and I can see I've still got some of my tailor's tacks on the back there from my other tailor's tacks. Just take those out. That's for here. They've done well to mark the position. I'm just going to do a couple of stitches in place on the back. And then I'm going to put my needle in on the back of the button and then go between the facing again and the front and just leave about an end of about 1 inch. I like to do that because I think that it doesn't come on, the ends don't poke out, it doesn't come undone quite so much. So that's our first button sewn on. So I'm now going to use that guide all the way up, so the distance from the edge of the garment, but use the line going across as to where they should be. You can also measure as well to make sure that they're in the right place, and then the corresponding button will go across from the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and put all of those on and then come back to you and we'll talk about sewing on the press studs. Okay, so I've just sewn on all of those 6 buttons. Hopefully you can see those there. And I must admit that I did check between them. So they're 1.5 between them on each of mine, from the centre of the button to the centre of the button. And then they're about 1 and just over 1.25 inches apart from each other. I did find, I mean, I'm glad that I didn't mark my buttons placement with pen or something that was non-erasable, because had I have done so, I think I would have ended up with some marks in the wrong place, because I think the biased nature of this front panel has sort of stretched slightly and has just meant that not all of the tailor's tacks felt as if they were in the right position. I know they were right according to the position on the pattern when we marked them, but when just through the stitching process, I think some of those might have just distorted slightly. So just to let you know, that's what I had to do, just in case you have to do the same with yours. Now, in order to sew the press studs on the bottom here, what I want you to do first is to find your hem, and I want you to lay your panel over so that the edge of your top panel hits directly onto the seam line of your bottom panel, and that the edges at the bottom are the same. And I want you to put a pin across the bottom there just to hold that. Now kind of work your way up the front of this panel so that the dress, so that the edge of the panel sort of sits against the seam line of where the skirt is attached. And as you're kind of working up, just put a couple more pins in just to hold it in position for you for when you're going to be sewing your press studs on. I think that will just help you be more confident of getting these so that everything all lines and lies nice and properly when you're sewing them. Okay, so we know then from the position of the letters on here that we've got an A, B, C, D. So these two here don't have press studs on them. So if you look at your neckline and the way the shoulder is coming over here, that'll give you your orientation. So it's the one top across left on as we're looking at it on the table here. So the top left one you want a press stud, that's part A. Top right you want a press stud, that's B. The one below it is C and the one below it is D. So that's how we know where we're going to be putting our press studs. So we're going to sew them the right way round in terms of all of them the same way. And the way that I tend to do them is they've got like a, so if I'll just take one apart for you. I hope everybody's familiar with press studs. This is what they look like. They're just a two-part thing that then just press into each other. So I'm going to put the one that is with the knobble side up, I'm going to put that on the back of each of the buttons, and I'm going to do that first. So the way that I do that is I've got a knot in my thread and it's double. I'm going to take one stitch in the back of the threads in the back of the button, and then I'm going to start and thread my press stud on, and just thread it through at this moment just so it's on your string. I'm going to put my glasses down so I can see what I'm doing just a little bit better. Okay, and then what I do is I've got my finger underneath the button underneath. Let's just take those threads off while we can, off the end of the thread, off my knot. And then I'm going to sit the knobbly bit of the press stud so it's directly underneath the button. So I've got my fingernail on top of the knobbly bit on the top, and I can feel that that's directly over the top of the button, because by doing so it exposes the edge, so we can just take a little thread of the fibre underneath. Just make sure your needle will go through your press stud, and you can just do a few. I'm just going to do 3 on each side, little over stitches, and you just need to be able to catch enough of a fibre. You don't want to be able to see your fibres caught on the right side of your garment, so you're just trying to be really careful. When I'm ready, I then slide underneath the fibres and go onto the next set of holes, through the hole, so that then attaches that down. And now very carefully we're just taking a couple of fibres of the back facing only. We're not going right the way all the way through, and I think just doing it like this on the back of the button just helps it raise it up for you so you can see where you're stitching. So 3 stitches through there, and then go back in again, but travel across to the next hole in the press stud, and then without attach any thread, just go through the hole then. So kind of like a 2 or 3 step process just to go through, and then find 2 or 3 fibres again, and then through, and then across to the last one. And just keep checking to make sure you can't see your stitches coming through onto the top of your garment, because it'd be a shame at this stage now to spoil it. And then 3 stitches through this final one, just catching a few fibres from or a few threads from underneath. Okay, so once I've done that, I then travel across and to the next one, and then I travel back again, so the next one being the next sort of the stitching where we started, and then back again, and a couple of stitches back and forward like this just seem to anchor that thread in place. Oops, let's get it through underneath so it's easier to get through. And then when that's through, I'm then going to travel between the 2 layers of fabric and give me a long tail before I need to snip that and take that off. So that's got the first one on. I'm going to do all of the same, so 1, 2, 3 on this edge here, all the same, and then the one at the top inside. And then once we've done that, the way I sew my other ones on is that I can get a pin. Still got my front pinned down, look, so that I've got 1, 2, 3 pins holding that all in place. And then what I do is I fold back this edge here to see where the knobble of oh, you probably can't see. So I fold back the top edge where the pin is, so I make sure that's all lining up where I want it to up the front of the dress. I fold it back so I can see where the knobble is, and that's straight on top of that tailor's tack. So that one's lined up perfectly. And I just put a pin through the fabric just to show me. Now, coincidentally, it's on top of the tailor's tack, which is great, but that's how I do it. So I smooth all that along, see where that is, and can you see where the bide to the pin is, right on the edge of that knobble of the pin. And then I take the bucket one, part of the... I'm going to need a longer thread. Let me just rethread my needle. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so now I've got my pin marking it. I'm going to remove the tailor's tack, so I don't want to sew those into where we're going to be putting the bucket, part of the thread. I've removed them all on the inside anyway, so that's fine. So again, I'm going to take a stitch just underneath the centre of that pin. Can't see very well because I've got black thread and black press studs onto a black section, but hopefully you can see. So I've taken a stitch through, so my knot is going to go underneath the bucket. I'm then going to come through from the underneath, through one of the holes in the side of the bucket, and then pop that on top of where my knot was. And then holding it with my thumbnail, I'm going to take 2 or 3 stitches through. Oops. Let me hold this right. The fabric, just to secure it. And this stitches can go straight right through if you wanted them to. Travel across to the other stitch. Make sure you've not got any loops, and I have. That's it. Just pull them out if you have. Through the hole on the other side, and then take your 1, 2, 3 stitches there, and then travel across to the other side, up through the hole, and we're going to do 3 stitches just there as well. So that's 1, 2, 3 there, onto the last hole, through the hole, and 1, 2, 3 stitches there. Okay, so once we've got those on with those stitches, I then travel between the 2 again, just a couple of times backwards and forwards. It just seems, as I say, it just seems to give a bit of an extra security on it. So 1. Make sure I've got a loop on there. Make sure you've not got any loops in your threads. Back once again, and then I'm going to go back through the facing again and give it a nice long tail, just so you can't see on either side. About 1 inch is in all you need, and then snip that off again. And then when you put these on top of each other, these should then clip in place and should be nice and neat with where you need them to be. So I'm just going to go ahead now and put another one on here, another one there, and one there. Put those all on, and then our dress will be finished, and I'll try it on Luna, see how it looks, and I'll do a roundup. Okay, so I've just finished getting all the press studs sewn on, so let's pop this onto Luna. Let's have a little look how she looks. Hopefully she's going to look great. Just do your press studs up for you, Luna. Make sure you're properly dressed. Let's put that one under first. How does that look? Oh, we need to do your bow as well, don't we, first? There we go. Okie dokie, let's have a little look. Little assessment, see how you look. Don't need my glasses anymore. Right. Well, I like that. That pressed stud might just need to go over a little bit more. Just the thing, isn't it, when you're just trying it on, you just sort of, yeah, I might move that pressed stud over a little more, but it's not bad, and it's pretty much where it needs to be. It's just me tweaking it now if I wanted to do anything to tweak it. So there she is in her lovely, lovely tartan dress with her facings there. Let's do the back of the dress. Lovely neckline there, those grown on sleeves. That little tie is just about 1.5 inches longer each side than it was on the pattern, and I like it. And as I say, you could have put ribbon in there instead. Excuse the bits of thread, I need to go over with a lint roller. But no, I'm really happy with that, and I hope that you are too. Let me just turn the camera around and we'll do a little roundup. Well, we have the roundup. I couldn't resist just popping her coat on just to show you what it looks like as an outfit if you were interested in the red colourway. Hopefully you think that looks really, really sweet on her. She's got the same tartan on the undercollar as she has on her dress, and her little bow on the back of her coat. So the video for making the winter coat is already, skating coat is already on my channel, so you can always pop along and have a look at that. And one of my subscribers said with the spare fur from the collar, they're going to make a headband for her, and I think I might do the same because I think that'll look really sweet. But yeah, really pleased with how that whole outfit is looking. And as I say, we can just undo the catch on the dress, on the coat, and there you've got her tartan dress. Okay, let me just spin the camera around. And so it was light when we started, and it's now dark outside when we finished, but Luna has her winter dress. And I think she looks really lovely in that, if I can get the light right for you. So it's got the lovely tie on the back there, lovely full skirt, those grown on sleeves with those side panels that we had to fit in, and then the gathered skirt all the way round, her 6 black buttons, the crisscross on the front, the bias on the front there, and everything all matching up all beautifully. So I hope that you've enjoyed stitching along with me today, and that you are going to have a go at making the winter dress. And it really is a lovely pattern, and I think that Luna looks very festive and very special in it. So thank you very much for sewing along with me today. And if you're not a subscriber already and you've enjoyed the video, please do consider subscribing. And if you could give the video a thumbs up for me, a like, I'd really, really appreciate it. And also if you can leave a comment if you feel inclined to do so. Both of those two actions do help promote my channel to other viewers, and I'd be really grateful if you could do that, because we're trying to reach as many people as we can to encourage them to have a go at sewing, and hopefully to achieve more than they thought that they could do. And by sewing along with me, hopefully I can do the same for you as well. But from Luna and I, thank you very much indeed for watching. Again, just a quick thank you to Colleen Moulson-Hewes, who is the sponsor of the video. She actually gifted the kit to me for making Luna's dress and also her winter coat. And if you're watching this video first, the video for the winter coat is already live, which is the second part of this outfit. It's a beautiful, beautiful velvet coat with a fur collar on it. So if you want to have a go at making that one as well to make the complete outfit, then that video is already live for you. Okay. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for being here. I really, really appreciate your support. Take care, everybody, and happy stitching. Bye.